How you doing?
What's up?
I was just wondering. It feels like there are a lot of Orthodox people on Twitter now, and some of them feel fake, and some of them feel real. But I was wondering.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, for real. I mean, it's the same with all other denominations
Right.
too. But what is the difference between Protestantism, like general Protestantism, and Orthodoxy? Because it does sound interesting when I hear about it.
So the main differences would be that, Orthodoxy believes in apostolic succession. Protestants, I mean, the only Protestant group that even acts like they have that would be like one small group of Lutherans, and some Anglicans claim it. But they don't, what an Anglican means by it is not the same thing that Orthodox means by it. So kind of like the way Roman Catholics believe in apostolic succession as in a succession of bishops, we believe that. So we're more close to Roman Catholics on the topic of apostolic succession than we would be to a Protestant. And when it comes to things like the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, we believe that closer to what Roman Catholics think than what Protestants think. But we're also very different from Roman Catholics in many key ways too, like the papacy and sort of other extreme views that Roman Catholics have that we don't have about Mary and that kind of stuff. So from an outsider's perspective, in certain areas or ways it might look like Protestant Orthodoxy is more Catholic, but in other ways we're maybe even more closer to Protestants in certain ways. But we don't believe in sola scriptura as most Protestants do. We don't believe in a low view of sacraments as most Protestants do. We don't believe in a branch theory of the church, or that the church is divided amongst 1,000 different sects. We believe the Orthodox Church is the one true church. So those would be some of the key things that we believe in contrast to Protestants. We don't believe in sola fide, justification by faith alone, etc.
Okay, and also I was wondering, because you kind of pointed out some of the differences between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. The reason why I don't like Catholicism is because I feel like there's a lot of idolatry in their practices. Are there? I mean, you're Orthodox yourself, so I wouldn't imagine you would think there are any idolatrous practices. But would there be any?
I think the Pope is an idol. I think the Pope himself is like the ultimate idol of Roman Catholicism.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and the way that they pray to certain saints, and as you mentioned, Mary, it's getting to the point where I've heard that there's some people in the Catholic Church that want to express like the divinity of Mary, and saying that almost holding her as even with Christ. Is there at least any oddities in Orthodoxy that you might be able to point out? Or
well, I mean, typically most Protestants have a problem with icons, and so I'm sure that iconography would be one of the issues that Protestants would typically disagree with. My friend Lewis has a good documentary though that he made. I'm going to see if I can find it. Where he shows that there's a lot of continuity between the Old Testament temple worship and Orthodox Christian worship. So we didn't just come up with this stuff out of nowhere. We didn't just decide that we want to worship idols, so we're going to put icons everywhere in the church. Iconography in Orthodoxy comes out of the Jewish temple and synagogue services. And so even in the first century, if you look up the Dyer Europos synagogues themselves had iconography all over the wall. So I put into the chat here a link, which is the documentary that Lewis made on how Orthodox Christian worship is essentially coming out of the Old Testament tradition. And here's a book written by a Protestant you could read too, Hugh Wybrew. It's called Orthodox Liturgy, the Development of the Eucharistic Liturgy in the Byzantine Rite. And then there's another book here called Orthodox Worship, Living Continuity with the Synagogue, Temple, and the Early Church. That's also kind of the bases in part for Lewis's documentary. I'm going to put Lewis's documentary directly underneath this forum here on Twitter/X. So
I appreciate it.
yeah, so those are good questions, and but the simple answer is, if you get into some of the literature, you'll notice pretty quickly that even Protestant liturgists and historians have pointed out, church historians have pointed out, that the structures that we have in the Orthodox and even in the Catholic Church, the traditional Petrine rite, or the Latin rite, you could say, they do go back to first, second, third century formulations. So when we look at, for example, the way that Justin Martyr describes the liturgical service in 150 AD in his apologetic writings, it's basically still the same structure that we see in Orthodox liturgy today. So liturgical worship is the traditional practice of the apostolic churches, and even Protestant church historians will admit this now.